Okay. Now, I suppose with all of these, for me, there's a few problems, and one of them is always where to begin. Um, what I want to do is address a few things. And wait a second now, it'll take me a while to get going, and then I'll be in the flow of it. Um, I was going to say something happened. I want to talk about the sources of my inspiration for what I'm going to talk about now. Not saying I'm inspired to any great type of oratory here, but I feel that I have an obligation to talk about something. Um, and it's to do with the quote up on screen there. And I've for the last few weeks I've been butchering it, not saying it quite right, but getting the gist of it. But I'm not sure exactly how well that would have translated into people's ears and what they might have taken from it. So again, it's always good to go back to the source, isn't it? It's a good phrase to have. One of great many, I suppose, like little nuggets of truth, axiomatic statements of truth, just key phrases, words to live by. Because there's several things that I've thought about in the privacy of my own mind. Oftentimes when I'm doing something else, and for me, I'm not trying to say I'm like Jesus or anything, but I do enjoy carpentry. And I find that when I'm in the middle of trying to think about something, how I'm going to do something, or just maybe not doing something at all, and I'm automatically just fitting something into place that I've already cut to size or whatever it is, that I suppose it frees up my, I don't know whether it's my conscious mind or subconscious mind. I guess it's subconscious, to start maybe percolating thoughts into my conscious mind for processing, something like that. And it's at these times, maybe you're like me, that you wish that you had a tape recorder near you, or you were talking into a microphone so that you would be able to record them and say them, because they seem like such great thoughts. A bit like when you're having a dream. It seems like such a great dream. You wish you could remember it. Excuse me, and I never do. Now this one that I'm recording, I'm just not going to do any edits to cut out coughs or that kind of thing. And as well, then, like a fellow who I do admire his work. I don't know much about him as a person other than he's a Christian, but Mark Dice anyway, and I'll get on to him in a minute. He just in the last 2 days started doing 2 videos every day, one in the morning, one in the evening. And, the evening ones, he says, I'm sorry for the production quality, that he says, I'm not doing any edits and I'm not standing in front of the camera. He says that he finds it difficult to speak fluidly when he's got a camera in front of him. He says it sounds weird that he's just talking to a brick wall or to a lens or whatever. And so I don't have the camera pointing at me now, just a microphone. And I'm trying to record what I'm looking at on screen. And the funny thing is, as soon as you open the microphone to speak, that's when you're suddenly tongue-tied and you forget what it was that you wanted to talk about. Which is why I suppose it's so important to have notes when you're trying to give a speech in front of anybody. Because no matter how confident you are, I found you could just walk through a room or step up onto a dais, stand behind a podium, look out into the crowd, and all of a sudden you forget entirely why you're there. You can't even remember what you're supposed to be there for, even. And it's like hypnotism, where people say, 1, 2, 3, and you've forgotten your name. What's your name? And you see, you don't know what your name is, do you? And the more I ask you your name, the more you don't know your name. And hypnosis is something that, I knew about since I was a child. Maybe you did too. With, I was going to say Harry Houdini. Is he the most famous guy for hypnotism? But his feats of daring and things like that as well. But there was, of course, the guy was pretty much made it, I suppose, famous. And I'm guessing it was in the late 19th century. This guy called Mesmer, after whom mesmerism is called. But this underlying, I would call it gnosis, the under knowledge of how people work. If you understand how other people work, and you can hypnotize them. Very easy to exploit the mind. So getting back to phrases to live by, it's important to, when I was, one of my many sort of modes of lucidity, moments of lucidity that I had, like when certain things occur to you while you're doing something else, you could call them bright flashes of inspiration. was that it's important to work out what your morality is before the shrapnel starts flying, because by then you will not be able to think. I mean, if you understand that you can't think properly when you are just standing in front of a room full of people who are there wanting to hear what you say, or who've clicked on your video and they're wanting to listen to what you said, um, if you can understand how easily you forget what it was that you had thought you were about to do, but it was kind of nebulous and you hadn't fully concreted into a solid idea what it was that you decided you wanted to do in such a situation. Well, if that situation needs to be, excuse me, guided by morality, and pretty much everything we do now, we can see, well, it always needed to be guided by morality. But I think now there's more and more people who are going to be willing to agree that everything we do in life, from the smallest thing to the biggest thing, needs to be guided by a predetermined morality. Not something that we're just sticking to because somebody told us, but because we've worked it out for ourselves painstakingly over the years. And I might butcher his quote, but I'll see if I get up on screen actually. Well, anyway, it was Yuri Bezmenov. And I think I did a little video on it actually, who talked about the importance of having a better moral framework than those people who we consider to be our adversaries. I think I'll just look it up, and I don't mean to be self-promoting, but I think I did a short video of it where I was quoting him. You know, he, to me, what made it seem as though he was a genuine guy. A lot of people would like to go back and all these people and current people and say, oh, he's a shill, or he's an operative, or he is a something along the lines of, you know, somebody pretending to be a charlatan, like, but pretending to be a good guy, but he's not, and he's just going to tell you all these lovely things until one day he will slip something by you, and then he'll hoodwink you or trick you or betray you. So I'm going to go to my own channel actually. But anyway, what I was going to say was there, he didn't actually say it out perfectly, and he said it over a few ums and ahs. Now, hey, he was a native Russian speaker. He didn't speak English, so I mean, I am not even speaking in a foreign language as far as I'm concerned, and yet I trip over my words all the time. I'm going to try and see if I can find one of my own videos here. And so I'm doing it live, as Jason Bermas would say, and I am going to get onto him there as well. I think this is going to be a long one, and you'll have to excuse me. And while I'm looking for this, I'll try and talk at the same time. It's a short, although YouTube doesn't sort by shorts yet. That's a bit of a tongue twister. But what am I looking for here? I have to go on to the next page. What I wanted to say was what prompted all this was a fellow who, I'm not going to say his name. He knows who he is if he's listening. He might suspect, even by having seen the opening quote there. Maybe I better get back to this. The opening quote. David Henry Thoreau. The mass of men lead, in other words, the majority or the great body of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate city, you go into the desperate country and have to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. I don't know exactly what he means by that, but anyway, little creatures in the forest who still manage to fight fiercely, maybe. A stereotyped but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. Well, there's plenty, I take it as distractions, right? There is no play in them, for this comes after work. Yeah, you see, I think that as well. I don't want to celebrate anything until we have victory, but it makes me despair quite a lot to think that I won't see the victory in my life, and that things will then, like every other generation, continue to deteriorate and get worse and worse and worse. And one lesson I've learned from working in corporations is that just when you think that your working conditions, and oftentimes that's not to do with necessarily the building or the atmosphere physically that you're in, but the psychological conditions under which you have to exist. become more and more intolerable. The more you think that they can cut your pay and increase your hours and um, give you more and more tasks that are demeaning and have more and more incompetent people as your boss who are as vindictive as they are incompetent, the worse, when you think that you've reached rock bottom, you say, well, at least lads, can't get any worse from now. Um, then what you find is 1, 2, or 3 years later, you look back and you say, oh my God, if only we could go back to that particular state of affairs, which we felt we couldn't tolerate at that stage 3 years ago. That would seem like not heaven exactly, but quite a significant increase in our situation, quite a significant betterment of our situation. So what I found is, and what we used to say quite a lot is, once you think you've reached rock bottom, they'll just keep digging and make things worse and worse and worse. So, even if you think, oh, well, it mightn't be too bad living in a glass city in the wall, out in the desert or whatever, and you're only allowed to go from, say, sector 7G to sector 8A if you have a pass, or I should say, like, sector 7G to sector 7H. I nearly forgot what letter came afterwards. My God. And that's just to let you know there, not only am I not very clever, but there are some people in the world, I think there's a lot of people like me who wouldn't be able to say the alphabet backwards very easily, and they wouldn't be able to tell you necessarily they might be able to tell you what the 17th letter of the alphabet is. But if somebody's just quizzed you, said, what's the 24th, what's the 16th, what's the 21st, or what's the 15th, you wouldn't necessarily be able to pull it out of your head very quickly. But there are people who learn those things off, and so a lot of people can seem very clever, but in fact they've just done the work in advance. So what I'm advocating for you to do is to do the moral work in advance, so that you won't have to work it out when you're under great pressure, when the bullets start flying, or when you've got shrapnel in your leg or whatever it is, metaphorically speaking, of course, but everything can be a metaphor and literally as well. That reminds me, I must tell you the story, but I'll leave it, I think, for another time, about, because I've got a lot of stuff here lined up, like cue cards almost, but they're videos or little websites. But remind me, anyone who's gotten this far in the video, to tell you about the story of the British soldier and the Afrikaner farmer. A young boy, a young British soldier. He could have been 17, 18, 19, 20, probably around that age. They all were. Paul Hardcastle made a song that was just called 17. In the 1980s, it might have been 1985, 86, 87, 88, something like that. And it was just called, it was called 19, actually. Not 17, it was called 19, because that was the average age of the soldier, the American GI in Vietnam. And things never change, but remind me to tell you the story about the boy soldier, essentially. They talk about boy soldiers in Africa. If you're 19, you don't think it at the time, but you are a boy. Right, what I'm trying to look for here now is one of my own short videos. And as I say, it was, I think this is it here, not paraphrasing, but quoting Yuri Bezmenov, just by basically getting rid of a few of the pauses, just like I did there. Here we go. Oh, no, that brought up the... yeah, this is it. So the answer to ideological subversion, strangely enough, is very simple. You don't have to shoot people. You don't have to aim missiles at enemy headquarters. You simply have to have faith to prevent subversion. In other words, to avoid being a victim of subversion, don't try to be a person who, like in judo, is trying to smash your enemy and become caught by your own hand. Don't strike like that. Strike with the power of your spirit and moral superiority. If you don't have that power, it's high time to develop it. Yeah, so that's the key part of the end. I mean, it's all excellent advice, like from a father to all of us, his children. I'm pretty sure Yuri Bezmenov is dead quite a while now. maybe I'm not pretty sure. Now I'm thinking, was it only recently? I don't know. I can't remember. Um, don't strike like that. Strike with the power of your spirit and moral superiority. You can't just assume you have moral superiority. It's something you have to develop. It's something you have to cultivate, and it takes time. And as much as I resent everything that's happened, not just over the last 3 years, but really, I suppose I could say over my whole life and before I was born too, because one of the things I've realized, and I'd like to let people know, and it seems so obvious to me now, but like this is a game that has been going on for many generations. And I feel livid. I feel angry. I feel incensed. That's enough sort of synonyms for now, but I'm still reaching for the right word. I'm incandescent with rage that I feel betrayed by my own parents, even that I feel they didn't adequately warn me that this is a battle that has been raging for ages. I thought religion was all just, you know, woo woo. And it is, you see, that's the problem. It is. Most of it is a great distraction. Just like there's a lot of great things on YouTube. But most of it are just really distractions, frivolous, bubblegum entertainment for the mind. But I would like to think that most of my contributions have always had at least something that would be of more than just transient. I was going to say transient pleasure now, but just more than just a passing fancy. That there's something in everything that I've said, even if it took me a while to get there, that was worth chewing on and storing in your mind. And it's nothing that it's not an idea that I own, but an idea that you could make your own. Every human mind is capable of, I believe, because it seems to me that that's the way it happened, we influence each other. But I think there are ideas and thoughts out there that just because of where we are on Earth and who we are as human beings, that if you listen to your internal mind, however you want to, make a metaphor for that is about, whether it be your mind rather than your brain, your spirit, or your soul, or whatever it is. People talk about internal dialogue. However it is that you form your thoughts, however it is that you analyze the experiences that you've had, the thoughts that you form from that. We're all human in the sense that no matter where we live or what time we've lived in, what era or age or century or couple of decades or whatever it might be, there is something known as the human condition, and people never really define it. I suppose it's, the act of being born, living here, gradually realizing things, and being self-conscious as well, and gradually coming from a child who thought he was the center of the universe to then, when he has to socialize with other children, trying to find his way in that world, and then hoping he'd be a member of the adult world so he could get out of the sort of misbehavior, and maybe even insanity, which they've pathologized now as being ADD or whatever, just bad behavior, refusal to share, bullying, being mean, not playing nice with other children, and generally being cooperative. Adults try and instill the idea into children that they need to be good to each other, but you assume because they're giving you these instructions, and because adults tend to discipline children for behavior where children are mean or bold or nasty to each other, adults tend to discipline their children and say, or at least tell them that it's wrong to act that way. So you assume that the adult world is going to be one where everybody is cooperative and plays fair with each other and takes only what they need and shares what they can afford to share. When you get to the adult world, you realize, no, that's not the case at all. And then, for a while you think, oh, it's just men who are like this. You think women are gentle, kind, considerate, compassionate creatures. And then you realize, no, it's just that they look pleasant, and they seem gentle, and people call them the fairer sex. And there's always these nice things about them said. I might as well say, such as that my father. I'll tell this one story, I suppose, because it is relevant. My father said to me one time, this little sort of ditty of a phrase or of a poem. You'll probably know it. I'll say it in a minute. I'll tell you the story. I would have been less than 4 years old. I could have been 2 years old. I think I was closer to 2 years old. And what had happened, I might as well play something here just to have visuals going. Um, I might as well play something of my own here. Where am I trying to get? Something that I'll just loop around, but I won't have sound playing. I think hopefully I'll be able to mute the sound. Yeah, and again, look, I'm just not going to edit this for any silences that I make, and I hope you can live with that. And again, look, as somebody else said, I think as Mark I said, maybe I said this already. He feels like he's wasting people's time, even if there's a sort of a misspoken word or um, a pause that's too long. But please bear with me. At least you can see that it's genuine, and I appreciate his ones because he can see that he's genuine. Um, so yeah, hopefully that's not playing the sound from that there now. So well, it's not really a lovely image. I don't know what people mightn't like to look at that, so I'll just move on from that a bit there anyway. Um, but little grasshopper anyway. When I was a little grasshopper, my father, um, I suppose I felt didn't give me good advice. That's I wonder if that's particularly wonderful to look at either. No, I think I'll go to here. Right. Oh, I can't do that any higher. Okay. I would have sworn I uploaded it with more quality, but maybe I didn't. Doesn't matter. Right. To get back to it anyway. I think I was probably around 2 years old. Could have been two and a half, something like that. Yeah, it could have been three. Let's say I was 3 years old because I don't want to seem like I was too precocious. So the previous Christmas, I had asked Santa Claus, and by the way, I was always a skeptical child, which I am very grateful for as a quality. And you write your letter to Santa Claus, and at least that's the way it was done in my day. I don't mean to be sounding too old. Maybe kids still do. And I was told like you can ask for anything you like. I mean, I knew for your birthday you didn't want to be too greedy and say that you wanted anything too much. But for Christmas, like I was told, oh no, we're not buying it. It's Santa Claus, and like he doesn't buy the toys. Because I was like, where does Santa buy the toys? Does he go into? And when I was young, there was a department store in the center of the city. I don't want to be too specific about things, but I suppose look, I have an Irish accent. I never even wanted to admit that I was Irish. Um, and Anyway, it's just, I suppose, important to set the story. I think it is relevant. There was a department store, and it was called Switzer's, and it's since been sold, and I'm not sure exactly how it all happened, but it's owned by somebody else now. But anyway, this department store I think was there since Victorian times, and so there was a great history to that. And I always thought like that I was young and my parents were old, and that's the way it always was and always will be. And I remember my father when he grew up, like he'd be sort of saying, "Oh, see that there, see this town, or see this not exactly town, but this housing estate, or village, or whatever it might be." He'd sort of say, "Well, that it would be a suburb of Dublin." And he would say, like, that was just countryside when I was a kid. That didn't exist, like that particular town. And the way like so many cities are, it's just really a conglomeration of towns, or villages. And you're kind of with other cities, it's more organized as to what exactly is the city line and what exactly is the suburb line, and you can be surprised by that. But anyway, so I grew up in the suburbs, and when my parents got married, uh, their parents both kind of thought that they were heading out to the countryside. The suburbs were so far out, and it sounds like really a lot of American cities as well, that they became donut shaped then, um, because, and a lot of it was to do, I'm far enough into the video now, I suppose, to sort of say I'll just say it was something to do with something flight, something that rhymes with flight. And so I suppose it's funny what's on screen at the moment, but anyway, um, I won't get distracted by what's on screen now, and I'm kind of tempted to change it to something else. Um, Maybe I will. Maybe while I talk of it, it might be. I'll just look up what Switzer's is, and of course, Switzer is Switzerland, and I'm pretty sure Switzer is old sort of Swiss Dutch for switcher. Um, and that would not make sense. Like, so Switzerland, it's the crossways, the crossroads. But anyway, you see how eternal extrapolations. I keep getting distracted. Um, to keep getting distracted to other things, Uh, doesn't seem to be able to see anything there. I have a feeling there was a video. Geez, maybe it would be good, I think, for you to see stuff what I'm talking about. Yeah. So why didn't I think of this before? Maybe this guy wasn't a Swiss guy, but look, maybe he was Swiss, and he came over to Ireland and set up a department store. I might as well just let it play there while I'm talking. Hopefully I won't get copyright struck by it or whatever, Um, so anyway, I think I was brought into Switzer's. They had a fantastic window, uh, long, series of windows where they had all different themes of, well, not themes, but all different, like, it's like an advent calendar of all different Santa Claus stuff. The elves making stuff, and like, I mean, what you're looking at here is probably 1930s, whatever. I'm talking about 1970s, I suppose. So I'm Generation X. I didn't ever mean to tell so much about myself, these particular facts, because I don't like to give the system information, whether that system is human beings behind intelligence agencies or an AI which is nascent and becoming aware of its own consciousness, or whether, and I'm also probably did up until more recently hold this view absolutely, that AI is just nonsense, that it's just people pre-programming an automaton to say the things through its voice or through its mouth that is really their thoughts and opinions. I think we have to always consider that and remember that, because I'll get onto it in a little while, but I do think that they know that human beings are more likely to take orders from a robot that seems to be infallible and immortal than they would from just another human being. Because my attitude has always been, who are you, another human being, to tell me what to do? What gives you authority over me? And there is no answer to that. There is no legitimate answer to that. So yeah, I really hope now. I'm just saying that this is Channel 9 PBS. I'm really hoping that this is not going to be copyrighted. I wonder, is there anything I can do to sort of, maybe if I do that, and that's not helpful really. It's in the way of the subtitles. Yeah, and again, look, I'm sorry for the pauses, right? It's just, you can see I'm a human being. And as far as I'm concerned, I have no agenda or objective. And I have done my best to eliminate my biases. I try not to be biased. I try not to just say things because they might be things that would get other people to do things or act in a way that would be beneficial to me, So, and again, just a reminder, like, what I'm talking about here is really, it's addressed at someone who is feeling like that he is unable to take it anymore, and is also feeling that he can't control himself from it sounds like to me exerting violence on those around him. And that's why I think I have an obligation to speak. And I'm sorry for taking so long to get there. But as I said before, it's difficult to know where to start. Life isn't just a line that goes from, you know, like on a ruler, right? Not a king, but that's where the word comes from. But on a device that shows inches and feet, or centimeters, or millimeters, or meters. You know, and actually, I sort of lost my train of thought there. But what it is you can't just tell a story from beginning to end. You can't just start a particular place. It is circular, or it's more like a sphere. Maybe you're trying to tell a story in 3D, and it's not like you just, even if you would start in the fulcrum, or what you think is the fulcrum or the center, you don't know in which direction to travel out from there. And then even if you do, you kind of go, well, I want to backtrack, or do I go side to side along an arc, or do I go back along a straight line and then come out at another angle? You know. Anyway, back to the story. See, what I'm hoping is that he'll be able to relate. I think the most important thing is that if someone can relate to you and you can relate to them, and they hear that they're not the only one who has these thoughts, and so many thoughts, and a collection of thoughts, and a maelstrom, or maelstrom, like a whirlpool. Although I think it might be a whirlwind, even though it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be to do with water. But anyway, whirlwind, whirlpool of thoughts in your head, and it all becomes so disquieting. It discombobulates. I'm sorry for these kind of unusual words. You'd swear that I was a non-native speaker. No, English is my first language. I want somebody else to at least, maybe, hopefully, feel comforted, that they aren't the only one in the world who feels anguish, who feels this kind of quiet desperation, that they feel they can no longer keep quiet or keep contained within, you know. Got so many tabs open now, but I just felt like I needed them to remind myself of where I wanted to get. This is going to be long, I suppose. Maybe I'll chop it up, or maybe I'll just put it out as a 4-hour stream or whatever. Not a stream, but I'll just upload it. Hopefully on Saturday I'll do another live stream with JC if he's available. But the reason this guy said to me, you know, and I suppose, yeah, again, I don't want to, maybe he won't mind saying who he is, but I mean, I don't want to be too specific, but I mean, I remember him saying, and I didn't notice until afterwards when I look back through a recent stream, he said, you know, we were looking into, I think it was actually, I say recent, it was last week's, you know, we were looking at the myth or the history, or a bit of both, of this fellow, this Greek hero, I suppose, but Roman hero, I suppose, Greek made Roman, or not even Greek, like he was Thracian or Trojan, I think Thracian, but it doesn't matter. But this hero of old, and then sort of saying, well, maybe it's a bit of history, actually, not just mythology, and looking at all the, or not all of them, but a great deal of the signs and symbols that accompany his journey, and what they mean, and what his life was a metaphor for. And I believe it's a metaphor for the invention of copper. The invention of brass, and oh god, what's the other thing when you add tin to? I think when you add zinc to copper, you get brass, and when you add tin to copper, you get. My god. How is it that I cannot remember? See, this is what I was saying about earlier. You forget. It's like me forgetting my name, right? So there's brass, and there's copper, and there's zinc, and there's tin, and what's the other? Alloy. My god. Okay, I'll have to Google it. Or whatever this Brave browser does. Copper plus Tim. Tim Copper. Copper and tin. Bronze. Oh my god. Oh my god. And there you are. The first thing that's bronze is the brazen bull. Oh well. Uh, that's not what came up. There was brass pots and pans, but there you are. So now that's again another eternal extrapolation. Well, there's probably Isis feeding the boy um, Osiris, and she got the whole world trying to contain the whole world between the pillars of the thoughts of her own mind or the temples of her own mind. So she's got Apollo holding up the world there as well in her mind, giving birth or thinking about giving birth to Apollo. I don't know what, but I mean, look, symbols are polyvalent, as my friend JC keeps telling me. In other words, they can mean many, poly is many, and valent have values, I suppose, you know. So they can stand for many different things, or have, if it was a number or a numeral, it could have different values or mean different things, you know. I suppose numbers having different values is equivalent to, in language, words having many different meanings. So look, and those lamps are lovely. I flicked over this one because I don't know exactly what that is. But look, I have to get back on story, right? Back again, if I can remember it. To the story of Santa Claus. And no, it's not, because I hadn't finished the story about why I'm talking. I decided to say why I'm talking, right? So, um, you know, I spelled his name wrong and everything. I got it. So he's sort of saying, look, all well and good, but what's, the Aeneid or Aeneas or, you know, Roman writers like Virgil and Homer, and or even historians at the time. Look, and I'm not well versed in all this. Plutarch is somebody I'm thinking of, right? So he's like, all that is ancient history, right? Like, who gives a, right? Why is this relevant? In other words, right? And you see, at first glance, it isn't, and at second glance, you can see how, okay, fair enough, maybe there's some relevance, but we have greater things to be concerned with at the moment. And I totally get that. I want to let you know that I absolutely and totally understand that. And in case it sounds like that I'm just a pleasant sort of a guy and I'm easygoing and that I sound that I'm composed, I mean, not trying to compliment myself, but if it does sound like that I'm composed and unfazed, it's not the case. It's just, when I switch on the microphone, a part of maybe trying not to forget what you're going to say is also trying not to just cry or scream or rage about all the terrible things that have been done to me, all the times that I've been betrayed, all the times that my kindness has been paid back to me with spitefulness and bitterness, and all the times that I wasn't allowed to reach my potential because of all the terrible people holding me down. Well, it's not going to be interesting to you, and it's not going to help you. I also want to rage about all the idiots. I mean, well, I don't have to, like, of course, every American knows about Joe Biden. And even the ones on the left, like, they know, but they're just never going to admit it, that he's a buffoon. But he's their guy, so they're going to defend him. Whereas I would like to think that there's a lot of people on the right who would say about Donald Trump that they wouldn't defend him over certain things, or overall they might say he was better than the alternative, but there was certain things that he said that they would hope that he was saying it just to be strategic in front of his enemies, but that he would never really believe it or whatever. There was a lot of excuses made for him. But we would at least, I would think, have a propensity to cast a more critical eye over those things that the left might otherwise, if the shoe was in the foot, they would just sort of say, no, it's sacrosanct. In other words, cannot be criticized, is pure. That's part of our dogma of beliefs, and therefore just won't even go there, won't allow ourselves to think those thoughts. I think that's extremely bad for the mind, as is holding in all these terrible thoughts. We need people to talk to, and we also need to engage in other distractions occasionally, as long as we realize that they are distractions. And what I would say is, when I was a child, I didn't understand that adults went through so much anguish. I thought that's because for many reasons, I thought when you got old, you learned how to control your emotions. Nothing, unfortunately, is further from the truth. It's just nobody's going to listen to you. People joke. They joke all the time, go, I could complain, but who would listen, right? that's them actually saying, I could complain, but nobody will listen. So that's why I just have to try and keep all this sea storm and gales of winds somehow contained inside my mind while I walk. Concentrate then, use all the rest of my force of mind, of strength of character, of will to walk outside and smile at people and say, hello, yes, nice day. Yeah, grand day. Sure, 'tis grand. Yeah, not a bother. Yeah. How are you? Could complain. Yeah. But hold, listen. You always had a great wit, Tommy. You did. You know, that kind of way, or whatever regional accent you want to put on it. And I hate it because it's banal, it's trite, it's entirely predictable, it's meaningless, and it's inauthentic. There's nothing genuine about that interaction whatsoever, and yet we have these interactions all the time. And maybe in a way, I mean, I suppose you can sort of say, well, in that sense, then, even though you don't know who to trust online and you don't know if they're just telling you the things that you want to hear, in many ways, we're freer to express ourselves online. I mean, you can't see my face at the moment. Wouldn't add much to it. Not particularly good looking. Sorry, I'm not particularly bad looking, but I'm not particularly good looking either. So not good looking enough, whereby it would add something and become my brand. My face would become my brand. And you have to be very careful with that as well, you know? Because at some point then you'd have to sort of say, like, especially if you're like, say, Mark Dice, you know? I mean, a lot of people might envy his position, like, you know, that he's got nearly 2 million subscribers, but he hasn't gained, I think he's got 1.81 million or something. That hasn't gained probably a single subscriber in 2 or 3 years. There's no, I think, definite way to know if somebody is genuine or not, but I think he is on the balance of it, although nobody's perfect. But the way he talks, his catchphrases, like, there's a part of it that's persona, but a lot of it would be, you know, what you would get probably if you met him. And I'd say it must become confusing for a lot of YouTubers. Sorry, my damn it! I let my I'm sorry for the silence there again. Boy. I let my computer go to sleep. See, can't even think of basic words. Hopefully it's still recording what's on screen. I don't know whether it records or stops recording afterwards, but I'll continue on, I hope so. And I'll get back to the original story in a minute. But again, I suppose I'm just explaining why I'm talking. And I lost my train of thought there. So anyway, I suppose I'll move on from that. It must get confusing, you know, and maybe this helps our minds fracture a bit. But look, when I was a teenager, I would have tried to develop a persona, you know, tried to be the cool guy, tried to be a great wit, tried to be a messer, tried to entertain people, tried to get a laugh out of people, tried to impress people with my skills, tried to, you know, I was a show off basically, you know, in many different ways. But I should have just tried to be me. I should have just, but then you don't know who you are really anyway. And do I still? You kind of, because I don't hardly remember a lot of the stuff that I did in the past. It seems like the only other day that I was a teenager, but then it seems like a million years ago at the same time. It's a very strange thing. So you do kind of grow into yourself. I, again, didn't want to give information to the AI or any. I just don't like being categorized, classified, you know, like known as 99 red balloons or Luftballon. I don't like to be clarified and classified. I don't like to be pigeonholed or put in a box. I don't want to be just, you know, another grain in the sand of this big cement of humanity they're going to put together, you know. I've always been not just resistant to that, but like outrightly belligerent and intransigent, stubborn, you know. But the best kind of stubborn, you know, would be when you resist things that are morally repugnant, and you know that they are, and you don't need to go to church to be told that they are. I think that's something I will have to get onto in a minute. or before too long. I guess this might be a 4 hour thing. We'll have to see. So the story about the Christmas letter that I wrote to Santa then, and going to Switzer's here anyway. So little kids there. I mean, that kid there on the left there looks like a girl. That could have been my mother or my grandmother when she was a child, And again, like, even though I'd seen photographs like that, one or two, like, or, obviously there wouldn't be that many, but you still think, like, well, but it's in black and white. And also there's this, I forget what that sort of effect is, where they put this kind of lens around it. But I think maybe old-timey photographs were a bit like that, probably something to do with the way that the lens directly cast its shape onto the, I forget what the type of special paper they had was. So everything about that tells me, well, that wasn't really real life. There was some kind of cognitive dissonance going on in my mind where I said, well, okay, that was my granny when she was a little girl, but at the same time, she was never a little girl. She was always just this old lady. And again, another thing that you start to realize when you are looking at approaching your 50s. So I'm in my 40s now. I was born in the 70s. And I don't want to get any more specific than that. When you get to middle age, and I think I'm beyond the midway point now for sure, you suddenly start realizing things that you always knew, but you never really fully allowed yourself to acknowledge, if that makes sense. So I always knew that my grandmother was at one stage in her life a little girl. But at the same time, I knew that my grandmother was always just old, because when I came into the world, the conceit was, or the self-deception was, or self-delusion was, that I was born at the beginning of time, and everybody else in the world was just waiting for my arrival. It's incredibly selfish, isn't it? Or self-centered. But I have a feeling that most people probably feel like that. And they might not realize that that's what they're thinking or feeling. There's a lot of unexamined thoughts that stay nebulous in our minds, and we often don't pull them out to examine them properly. Oftentimes we dare not to. It feels like too much work. A lot of people say that over the past 3 years, or certainly in 2020, that a lot of them said, well, it gave me a lot of time to do research. Hopefully, I think as well, it gave a lot of people time to think. I still feel that I resent a lot of the things, but it is only through adversity, that we, I suppose, grow stronger. You know that phrase, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. I mean, obviously, like, if you take some bad drugs, or if you if you have a car accident, if you're left a cripple for the rest of your life, or if whatever, damage your liver with, I'll say a more safe kind of thing, damage your liver with alcohol, whatever it might be, it doesn't necessarily make you stronger. You know what I mean, right? And people do misunderstand these phrases, but it's hardships. That's what it really means. Hardships that you go through makes you mentally stronger, and maybe physically too, or that that you're physically capable of surviving things. Makes you tougher in that sense. So even though I resent everything that's happened to us, and the Klaus Schwabs and the George Soroses of this world, and indeed any of our own European or American leaders, they're not doing anything to sort of say, well, we'll be cruel, so that the unintended consequence will be that they'll be more morally and mentally, physically strong, or that it'll give them the opportunity to work out what it is that they really believe in. I did a short video, I think, one time. Maybe it wasn't a YouTube short, but it was only about a minute long, just bellowing. That's when I was very, very frustrated. Like, what do you believe in? Because if you believe in something, you'd better stand up for something. Because I couldn't understand why in March 2020, when it seemed to me like you couldn't get a more clearly articulated, open declaration of war against its own citizens by every government of the world, but certainly the Western world. Because, I mean, again, I'll remind Americans, what happens in your country also happens in every other country. And we already have been tied culturally in the Western world for sure, since I was born, essentially. Um, that it may not have been as tight as it is now, but it certainly was there. Like for example, like sometimes a movie would come out in the cinema in the States, but it might take sometimes a month or two before it would be released in some of the countries over here. That occasionally can still happen. I remember sometimes going to France and kind of going, they're only you can sing billboards for a certain movie, and I'd be like, what? But at the same time, you got to understand, like, it's unusual that well, most would still speak French, but yeah, most French people speak French as the first language. But a weird thing happened between the 80s and now. Now most young people can speak English, and they don't mind speaking English, and they're happy to speak English. In the 80s, that wasn't the case. They didn't speak English, and they didn't want to speak English. But anyway, I will get back to this story here. When I was, let's say, 3 years old, split the difference between 2 and 4. So can I get a picture of of the? It's funny enough now. It says Murphy and Switzer, so Switzer must have bought Murphy out. That doesn't really show uh, the window there. I wonder, is there a picture of it? It would have to be from the 80s, I would say. Maybe the 90s. I don't know. Yeah, and sorry for the pause. I'm not very good at talking while I'm. Yeah, but there you are. Anyway, there's a few photographs. Damn it, I don't know how to open this large. Just clicking on it didn't do anything. But anyway, um, right, okay. Pinterest is not very good. Um, look, maybe this will be equivalent, and you'll see as well that like we're not so different. Um, but the funny thing is, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but this was a store from Victorian times. And you can see in there, and it's just like how people would shop. Like there was no real such thing as supermarkets. There was your local grocery store, and then it was a big deal to go to, like, whoever. Maybe I don't know if people went once a month or if they went on a special occasion, not regularly like that. Maybe only once a year to a department store, and it would be a special occasion. Maybe the mother and the father might buy something special for each other and bring the child along to see Santa Claus. And for me as well, like they talk about like queues for Santa Claus now, and even having to book it and find the closest one on your app and all this sort of stuff. I don't remember that there was any queue, but there must have been a queue. But even if there was a queue, and there was, now that I remember, actually, now I'm thinking about it, but they made the queue like a tunnel, like as if you were going under a sort of an entrance to an igloo or something like this, and it was still magical. It was decorated. There was maybe Santa music playing, and so there was other kids there, and so the whole experience, knowing you're with other kids, and of course they're all just like me, and I mean very much just like me, I thought anyway. And so you're all excited, you're all there. It's like the best thing ever, like even to be in a queue like that, Obviously, maybe not for your parents, but it was just fantastic. So, but the windows outside, I mean, it was a long, long building, and the windows outside were just magical. Yeah, I suppose, like, there's one, like, and actually, that's funny enough now. Well, maybe that actually looks too modern. It looks like it's basically a female mannequin. But maybe that was one. I don't know. That looks like it could be. Oh, that's a London department store. But basically, yeah. Look, the other thing I suppose to say is that this was modelled. I say Victorian because it would have been modelled on the famous department stores of London. Fortnum and Mason, I think, is perhaps the most famous one. Yeah, and you'd get a sticker like this, even something like I've been to see Santa at Switzer's, like, and it was maybe a boast as well to say that you'd gone into Switzer's, whereas one of your friends, I don't know, maybe I hope I wasn't this mean. One of my friends might have only gone into. I won't name any other brand names, but like there was a large chain of supermarkets that you could go and see Santa Claus in, and it was sort of like at that time the brand was known for being basically like J.C. Penney or what's another one, Kmart. Your Kmart Santa Claus. um, Funny enough, I say that one looked around, but there's I don't know where that is. Oh, that's Hotel Etat Uni, so that's United States, believe it or not. So I guess it's Opera is a district in Paris, so that's in Paris. So anyway, we thought we were amazing. Um, so there you are. There's somewhere in Paris, but it's called the Haussmann. So it's a German Haussmann Boulevard in Paris. Um, and that does look like an opera theater. Look, it doesn't matter. I only wanted to have some background thing there. That font somehow looks more, and it was a German Gothic font as well, really, for Merry Christmas. You know, why wouldn't it be? I never realized until now how much of our cultures were intertwined, uh, Celtic, German, Dutch. And I guess that's why it's important. It's piecing the things together. And why is it important? I suppose because context is important. And I've had to start considering the possibility that I'm not so special, I'm not so clever, and that I don't know it all. And there was things that existed before I was born, and there will be things that exist after I die. And it's only when you get to middle age, and I can feel a lump in my throat now, that you start to really think about these things in a way that you haven't before. And that sounds so trite, sounds so cliched. It doesn't fill anybody in who hasn't thought about it in the way that it sounds like maybe I'm telling them what they need to think about. Unfortunately, understanding things and feeling things, understanding things necessitates feeling them. So I knew these things before, but I didn't feel them. And I'm getting a sense of how people were the same before me, even though they lived in the black and white days. And that whatever the future will be, that I would love for human beings to still retain some of their humanity, and that it wouldn't be too late. Like it feels like for me, to only really feel my humanity at this stage, and to have to consider the possibility that there is a God, even though I thought that, believing in God was all just no more or less superstitious than any other primitive belief, of, like, say, worshipping the sun when it rose in the morning. I thought, like, don't those people realize that the sun isn't rising, it's just simply the earth rotating on its axis? Silly boys, in the past. And I think that I thought that I knew that because I'd been taught that by adults who knew everything, and they were telling me all the stuff. And I'm not saying the earth is flat either. I would see that as a distraction. Like, where does that get us? I would say to people, even if we accept that it's flat for the sake of argument, so what now? People have said to me, oh, well, that would mean people would realize then that God is very close to us and he's looking down on us and he can see us all. And so that, and then I go, yeah. And then they say, and then everyone would be nice to each other. They'd be kind to each other. And I'd be like, aha, well, then they'd be nice to each other for the wrong reasons. You see, I think if God exists by necessity, he would have to hide himself. Not just the devil. I think God would have more of a reason to hide himself. He'd want to know that whatever you did believing that there's no consequences. I know there's a lot of religious people out there who absolutely are convinced that they have talked to God and they know God exists and they've seen him and all that. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, for the majority of people who haven't seen God, it's okay to have doubts. You can't be certain of it. God requires you not to be certain that he exists, because he has to know that you're not just being good so that you either won't be punished or that you'll get a reward in heaven. And that you're not doing it out of either fear or coercion. That whatever way you choose to act is the way that you would act because you know it's right, because you feel that it's right inside you. Right? You don't, and I suppose I'll get onto it now, right? In that, I did have it here. I can get rid of that tab, at least close one or two things down. No, it's the Bible Gateway that I'm looking for. My mother said to me, by the way, when it could have been that she was in her 40s or 50s or whatever, maybe 60s even, I don't know. But at some point after her 40s, like, when she had basically encouraged my skepticism, and she did, by the way, she always wanted me to go to church and all that when I was a kid. But I think when I was, certainly by the time I was 15 or 16, definitely 16, I just would have said to her and my father, like, just not going to mass anymore, deal with it, that's it, not going to church anymore, and you can't make me, and that's the end of that. And they had to accept it. So I would have been exactly like Christopher Hitchens. And by the way, so much of the stuff that he said, 99.9% of the stuff that he said is spot on. I mean, religion has been the cause of so many wars, people fervently and ardently believing that they're absolutely right because their God tells them that they're right. And so that they feel they have a moral obligation, not just right, but an obligation to go and kill lots of other people. So I did think for a long time, if only we could disabuse people of these false notions, that the world would be a better place. But look, I'm neither a Catholic nor a Christian nor an atheist, but I'm not an agnostic either. None of these fashionable things. I'm just somebody who's looking for the truth, and I do think that everything Jesus said was basically, listen, don't bother with all these Sadducees and the Pharisees and whatever they're saying, right? You don't have to wash your hands while rubbing them to the left and then 3 rubs to the right and then say these magic words and then kneel down and then stand up and whatever, right? All of that is a distraction, I would say, from the work you need to do on your own mind, on your own soul, if you like to think of it, your own spirit. Quiet reflection on things. Commune with God directly, if that's how you see him, or interpret whatever you'd like to picture God. It doesn't necessarily have to be a him if you don't want it to be. If you're a woman, if you'd rather think of God as some kind of divine spirit that is neither male nor female, or might be more female, like whatever brings out. It's like me. I'm now talking to my phone and looking at my computer, right? So whatever would bring out the best in you. And you'll have to know what that is and not look to any other man or institution to tell you what that best thing is to do. You'll have to know what is the right thing to do, what is the moral thing to do. You can't just look up a dictionary and go, what does it mean to be moral? And ask somebody else, what's the right thing to do in these situations? And be programmed as though you were a computer following a procedure. In this situation, perform this procedure. Engage morality circuits. You can see how that's ridiculous, right? And so I absolutely would reject any body of people, any institution or anybody else telling me what is the right thing to do. I know what the right thing to do is if I examine my conscience carefully. And I believe that I'm not the only one. I think that is the nature of humanity, or getting very close to the core of it. That every human being should never abdicate the responsibility for creating, cultivating, and maintaining and fixing, wherever necessary, any errors in his own moral framework. Can't be something that can be handed to you. So, what was I trying to look for here? Right, well, maybe it was this, to sort of say, there is people can interpret the Bible then, and there's an incentive always to interpret in whatever they want to mean. And obviously for context, you're going to have to read around it. Where 2 or 3 are gathered. I'm just going to, so this is like one of those ecclesiastical, ecumenical maybe, questions, is the church necessary? Of course, people who belong to the church, they're going to go, oh, well, of course it is. Like, we have to remind the faithful in the flock, because they can forget out there in the lay world, in the normal world, they can forget. They need to come to us every Sunday or Saturday, whatever it might be, or more often than that. We'd like if people would come more than every Sunday, but at least if they listen to the word of the gospel every Sunday, that'd be better than nothing. This kind of thing. So the church is necessary. You'll never find any institution saying, "Well, I think actually the world would be better off if we got rid of the institution that supports me and my life, whether they earn money directly or not." And you can put that to any corporation. No corporation is going to say, no investigative body, no media company is going to say, well, we've told all the news there is to know. Everything's gone back to normal now. We'll just disband our media organization, right? So why would the church say, or any church, say, yeah, we just need to get rid of ourselves. I think we've gone beyond our useful period of time. We're never really that good, and we're definitely not helping. So we've just decided to disband. Now here's I was trying to look for Matthew 18:20. Free gift. You see, everything's trying to sell you something. Although at least if they're just trying to sell you something like that, that. But I'll get onto the Christmas story. But that probably if that's how they're earning the money, at least they're not doing something else, selling your data or whatever, you know. So right, let's I suppose start here. No, look, I might as well. No, I'll skip over the harming little ones, okay? Because that's easy. You're going to go, oh yeah, I think people who harm children are wrong. I'm just a good guy like that, you know. um, okay, let's start here. How think ye? How think ye? If a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the 99 and go into the mountains and seeketh that which is gone astray? It feels more tongue twistery now with the seeketh. Even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Fair enough, he's saying everyone's important, even the ones who've gone astray, and that's a heavy metaphor for people like who've done anything and whatever. That to me that rankles with me, but anyway, don't want to be like the other brother in the prodigal son saying, "Why did you kill a calf for him? I stayed here." Anyway, you know. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. In other words, don't bitch about him to other people. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. My voice started cracking there. Well, now at least you know that I'm genuine, you know. My brothers have beef with me, but they won't tell me what it is. I think basically what it is they're angry that I spurned my mother for a few years, you know, maybe several years, because I felt that she was being not exactly immoral, but that she was being a hypocrite in that what would have been some of her principles and ones that she would have bestowed onto me and made sure that I didn't do. In other words, just, you know, be a hypocrite. I felt she was being hypocritical, and I also felt that she should have been aware of it and didn't need me to point it out to her. So I think she got angry with me as well, but I stopped talking to her, then stopped visiting her, and she must have explained to my brothers how heartbroken she was. But she never, maybe she did try and apologize to me, but she would have maybe sent me some texts saying, "Oh, good news about something else," like, you know. But I always felt like that's a stupid overture to, you know, working out a position whereby she can kind of slide in what seems like an apology but isn't really. Do you know what I mean? So it's not, you know, the way people try and approach you so as to not lose too much face. I was always taught, if you know you did wrong, you come and you say sorry, and you come and say sorry immediately. So I was holding her to her own standards, and of course nobody ever wants to do that, you see. And you can hear my voice now. You see, I don't want to do this again now. So I do regret that. I wish that I had found a way to go back and well, I'm doing it again, you know. I wish I'd have found a way to go back and find a way to allow her to reconcile with me without having to feel that she was climbing down too much. Because unfortunately, that's just the way it is. As a parent, she would feel that she was always my parent. And even though she was a great woman who was very moral and principled, she still would have been human, and she would have felt, I don't want to apologize to my own son. You know, she would have felt that she was better. How could the student have become the master? Or how could the student dare to teach the master his own lessons or her own lessons, you know? Now, of course, I heard myself saying all that there. I'm not trying to claim that I am, you know, perfect, right? You tend not to see your own failings so well, you know, as others do. That's unfortunately part of the human condition as well. So I didn't mean to reveal this much about me, but I suppose it's important because if you're listening this long, I think you'll know that you can't really fake, even though you can't see my face, you can't fake the old lump in the throat, you know, from trying to essentially hold back tears, you know. Because one of my brothers doesn't speak to me. Oh, I'm doing this again, but I will upload this. And I've approached him a few times, and he just won't talk to me. He walks away, or he shouts at me to get away, or he would be violent with me. Even though, I mean, I'm obviously older than him, but it wouldn't be productive anyway, but it's been a few years now. I think actually the last time that oh boy, gonna have to. Didn't want to reveal this, but I suppose I might as well have to, even though I haven't even told the story about the Christmas when I was 2 or 3. But anyway, he said, and I really didn't want this to be a confessional. It's so much dirt now that either the AI or intelligence agencies would have on me now. They'd go, oh yeah, we've got a fracture in the family there, fantastic, we can exploit that, or even know exactly who I am then. But when my mother died, which I think was 4 years ago now, I think it was towards the end of 2018, so just over 4 years ago. I won't tell big long story, but I suppose just to kind of put it in a certain different way, I saw my mother before she died. She was on her deathbed, and my brothers had all been there with her for several days, and I was quite far away out of the country, and my father gave me a call, but he said, "Oh, it's all right. It's too far. You don't have to come back." And I went, and I thought that he was ringing me to tell me that my mother was already dead. But I said, "But is she still alive?" And he said, "Yeah, but she won't be alive for much longer." So I said, "Well, do you think like there's a day left or whatever?" And he said, "Oh, well, maybe, So I said, "All right, well, I'll get on a plane." I'm not trying to say that I was a good guy or anything like that, because I did think about not. If he was going to say to me, "Oh, it's only, a couple of hours," or "She's practically dead already," I would have taken his word for it, probably, Because I had actually said goodbye to her. I mean, it wasn't that I hadn't seen her in years. I had reconciled with her. But I think my brothers were just still harboring a lot of perhaps what is a legitimate resentment towards me for having put her through pain, which I never got to see, perhaps, Excuse me. I said no editing anyway. And I certainly didn't mean this. I never intended this to be a confession, but we'll move on now in a minute anyway. But what reminded me anyway of it was this thing, moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou shall have regained, I could nearly say there, a brother. But I had a row with all of them. I think all of them are a bit resentful towards me, but certainly one of my brothers in particular. He kind of felt proprietary over her, and I might as well say, like, sort of a couple of nurses. One was a male nurse, one was a female nurse, and I think they needed the male nurse to help turn her over. And the idea was, and I'm sorry for any graphic detail here, but they were going to rub what you call it, I was going to say like lotion, but whatever it is, and aloe vera, that kind of thing, into her back, and that there was sores there, that kind of thing, for being in bed for so long. And my mother, she was still like, it's so funny, like she was on morphine because of the pain, or on some other drug too. And my brother said, "Right, come on now, we have to get out of the room." And I know that he's often very squeamish about this sort of thing, whereas I believe that I've gotten mature enough not to kind of go gross when you might see some part of your mother naked, that sort of way. In case it would, maybe I probably wouldn't have to see it, but I kind of felt like, well, anyway, my mother said to me, "Here, will you stay in the room with me?" And like, she did that sort of under her breath whisper, or shouty whisper, that she often would do when I was a kid. Like, she sort of said, say, like if I was in the supermarket, she might say, like, "Look, don't say anything, just follow me, we'll go here, right? Don't make a fuss." And I knew if she'd talk to me like that, it was basically, there's no time to discuss this, don't ask why, just obey me. So she kind of said one of these things like that to me. And if anybody's familiar with Alzheimer's, not that she had it, but because she was under the effect of this drug, I think it's the same as the Alzheimer's. You can you can become lucid when you really use your mental energy. Do you know what I mean? And I got the sense she didn't like this guy or didn't like that nurse girl. And she said, will you stay in the room with me? And so I said, yeah. But my other brother said, don't mind what you're saying. Just get out. Stop trying to interfere with. The nurses have to do a job here. Stop trying to interfere with them. And I pushed back against him and said, do not tell me where to go or where I can stay or when I can't and this kind of thing, you know. But what that was coming out of was his feeling that he had jurisdiction over his mother, and who was I thinking I was jetting back, and he probably thought I was going to leave her to die without saying goodbye, and we had a fight, you know. Although I would have immediately, like, basically what I wanted to do was get out of the actual hospital ward and down outside and have an actual physical fight with him. But more, it didn't really turn into a physical fight, but you know, very nearly one, you know, more or less, bit of shoving. But since then, anyway, he hasn't spoken to me. So you can kind of see what he eats me up, you know. And look, sometimes I have considered whether all of this is indeed a hologram, a virtual reality of sorts already, like many people I know out there are considering. And I would feel enraged if all the, you know, the green screens came down now and they said, we have it now, we have it on tape, we just needed you to confess your soul. And that's been a huge part of why I've been so reluctant to say anything of any great substance that wasn't that I didn't have the ability to edit, you know. Where I already made the decision. Like, there was another one similar to this that I made, maybe, could be nearly 3 years ago now at this stage, and I said, no, I swear, I said I was going to upload it, so I will. I would feel that it was cheating. I would feel that I was being a hypocrite if I didn't upload this, as is, you know, which is why there's going to be these pauses and coughings and that kind of thing. I don't want to be a hypocrite, so that's part of my moral framework. I hold myself to the standards that I would hold others to. Very high standards, but I'm not trying to praise myself. And I'm trying to still examine all the contradictory things that I might hold within me, you know. And as time goes by, and you realize more and more the literal meaning of your own mortality, that there might not be an afterlife. There might be no such thing as carrying my conscience. Maybe there's no heaven, no hell. You just die, and that's it. And that the only immortal life is that your genes get to go on if you've been lucky enough to reproduce. Your genes might go on in somebody else who thinks, talks, and acts like you, but it's not actually you. So it's not the same you having your own thoughts. But maybe there is such thing as genetic memory, where as you go through the phases, the periods of your life, you start to feel thoughts. And this is perhaps genetic memory, where you kind of go, oh, I kind of remember this. I remember these great sadnesses and anguish and frustration. So I suppose that it's useful that, you know, you've been able to hear all the cracks in my throat, the lumps in my throat, and the inability to speak. And as you can tell, it's feeling sorry for myself, you know. And feeling sorry for things I could have done differently if I had been a little bit more mature. So anyway, yeah, I mean, even though he won't speak to me, I might try another time. I don't have his phone number, I don't have his address, but, you know, maybe it could be done, but we'll see. So I think it's better that you see how vulnerable and fragile I am, because I think men tend to look at other men and say, well, you know, when you're out in the street and you say, oh, he's got a smile on his face, or, you know, I might look at some other guy and say, he's tough and strong. There isn't a battle he couldn't fight. But is he, as I say, you never know the turmoil, the maelstrom of emotions that are going on inside a man's mind, that he's trying to keep it together, that he doesn't cry. He has to try and smile. He has to try and whistle while he walks. Otherwise, he might cry. He'd be terrified of it. I'm showing this fellow my fragility, my vulnerability, and my... it's just, I'm on the precipice here of crying all the time. And I'm doing it so that he knows that the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the anguish that he is trying to somehow live a life, go to work, earn money just to pay for his rent, just so that he can sleep there, cook some food to sustain his life, so that he can get into the vehicle, that he's hopefully had enough money to put some fuel in, that he can drive to work, to earn some money to put some fuel in his car, just to do it again over and over and over again. When nobody loves him, and that he feels that he's all alone, and that maybe nobody likes him, and that he's got no friends, that is what a man's life is. Now maybe some women can feel the same way too. They can feel isolated too. Sure they can. I said the other day, like, that everyone will always look after a woman more so than a man, on average, all things being equal. Yes, they will. It's very hard for a woman to accept that. And they'll say, oh, how could you know that? You're a man. You see, that just betrays the thinking. They think that you have to be a thing to know how that thing thinks and feels. It shows a lack of empathy. If you develop your empathy, you can picture yourself in somebody else's shoes, you can picture yourself living somebody else's life, and you can understand how they would feel. And the fact that you would say, oh, well, you're a man, of course, you wouldn't understand how... No, that just shows how you wouldn't understand. You see, it's terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And what breaks my heart is people only ever do anything when it starts to affect them. And that's why I thought in March 2020, I said, well, at least now nobody will be able to not see what's going on or pretend to not see what's going on. And now everyone will have to do anything. Although I would have preferred if people would have done something before it affected them. But all I saw happened in the main was people saying, now, how can I find a way to basically readjust to finding this okay? In other words, like that meme with the dog saying, yeah, this is okay. Can I, this is fine. Yeah. I'm glad it came up big. I'm sorry for the sniffing. So yeah, there he is. That's like his whole walls and his ceiling and his floor is painted of him. It's like it's a meta. This is okay, dog. And this is fine. This is fine. The house is on fire, but this is fine. That's all they did. So what annoys me most is that people don't do anything until it affects them. And then they expect plaudits. They expect to be praised for their bravery and morality for standing up for something. But that's only because it affects them. And again, I remind you of like what I spoke about God. Like, if he exists, he'd have to pretend he doesn't. You'd have to be at least only hoping that he exists, not knowing that he exists, in order to do the right thing. But in many ways, you'd be better off putting that aside for now and sort of saying, well, look, whether he exists or whether he doesn't, will that have an effect over what I do? How I carry myself morally, spiritually? The things that I do, those are the things that inform my actions in the world, how I speak to people and how I treat people, how I live my life. Whether God exists or not, whether the devil exists or not, whether reward exists, whether punishment exists, shouldn't I just do the same thing because it's right, not because something might happen to me? You see? So, okay, back to this here. But if he will not hear thee, then take. And I'm going to try and keep it together here. With thee, one or two more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word may be established. Fair enough. That's just practical advice, so that it's not a he said thing, You said this, no, I said this, that's not my recollection, well, maybe I could take a couple of my brothers if they were if they were inclined to agree that it would be a good thing for us all to be talking again. I thought my mother's funeral would reunite us, but unfortunately, they weren't of that same opinion. They just sort of said, "Let's get through the day, and we don't have to talk again after this." Then, or at least this particular brother I'm thinking of anyway, he said, "No, just because we're brothers doesn't mean we have to have a relationship." Um, and again, I don't know whether he was saying that just to be tough or whether he really believed it. You know, it's heartbreaking if he really believed it, or if either way, or if he was just trying to pretend to be tough. You know, he must have really hated me for something, but he wouldn't articulate it. And I suppose it's because he couldn't explain why. Maybe he couldn't justify it, or didn't want to hear the answer. I've told you my answer already. I felt that my mother was a hypocrite, that she didn't practice what she preached. And I expected her above all people, because she had instilled in me the morals so strictly. I expected her to understand and to know without being told. But as is always, it's easy to be harsh on others, maybe not as easy to be so harsh on yourself. And that's why I do my best to be as tough with myself as I would be with others, hold myself to the same standards, you know. But it hasn't really made me happy. It's being right is not um, always, and maybe not often, maybe not any time, commensurate with being happy. I suppose to be the mature person, you have to let other people feel like they've won. Unfortunately, I've found that you can never force somebody to apologize, and unless you do, like have these coercive methods like financial incentives to hold over them, they'll never do it autonomously anyway. So I suppose that's the way it is. You must forgive even though they never ask for an apology. Although I still think that it's not possible to forgive somebody who's never asked for forgiveness. But anyway, I think there'll be people who'll be able to say something about that. They'll say no, it doesn't require that they apologize, or that they even know you've forgiven them. So, uh, and if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But, and the church is like, it could be the body of people, or it could be going to see a priest in confession, maybe. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen, man, and a publican. Well, he's saying basically, if you tried again, you tried bringing more and more people and he still wouldn't talk to you, then he just don't ever talk to him again. Interesting. I don't know exactly what a publican is there, but it could be not somebody who owns a bar or a pub. I have a feeling that means something else. You can look it up in Strong's Concordance if you like, but probably just he's talking about a famous man, a man of words who says things that doesn't mean anything by them. He's just like a mouthpiece. Verily I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. So whatever you do there, here is there, as below, so above, you know. Whatsoever ye shall lose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. I suppose that's lost, shall be lost. If you lose on earth, that's what you loose. Well, look, this is just why loose and lose are so easily confused then. You don't lose something if you bind it tightly. But if something's loose, it might fall off the wagon. So I should say that I was an atheist, but I'm not an agnostic, and I'm not in the way that fashionable agnostics are, and nor am I a Christian. But I greatly admire Jesus Christ. I'm not a Christian in the sense that most people understand it to be, you know, or most people who say they're Christians. My mother said to me, I was full sure when I was, probably, I don't think I was even a teenager, maybe in my 20s, could have been in my 30s. I said to my mom, look, I have enough mental tools and enough morality and principles to be able to guide myself through the corporate world, which is our world. but there's always, in the big corporations, the machinations, the backstabbings, all of this. She said to me, look, at some point in your life, you you may find, like, in other words, don't throw the baby out with the bath water. You may find some of the parables, some of the stories from the Bible, or some of the aspects of religion or of catechism or whatever. You might find it useful. Just, So I sort of still was at the point where I sort of felt like, well, no, it's all old fashioned. It's all obvious. It's also obvious as well. But the thing is, even though it might be, it was only obvious in a nebulous way. But when I go to the Bible, and I do like reading the King James Version, because I do like, despite the fact that it's tongue twistery, and maybe using antiquated English that isn't as easily intelligible, I find that it's prophetic in the sense that it's poetic, it sounds beautiful, and the words make an inspirational sound. So that I find that it reinvigorates my soul with a certain kind of beauty in words. And so I have to say, she was right. And I wish that I could have said that to her while she was still alive, Okay. Again, I say unto you that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. So again, I mean, here again, I think you could legitimately interpret this as Jesus saying, church doesn't have to be in a building, in the same way as university doesn't have to be in a university building, right? The church is the people, and not just the ecclesiastical priestly class. The church is the body of people who believe, you see. And then you might say, well, what is a body, or what is a group? A group is 2 or 3 or more. But it can be as little as 2 or 3. In fact, it doesn't say more. He just says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Maybe or more is implied then, but anyway. And I think we should not get into torturous interpretations of the Bible, right? And you will know yourself if you're trying to interpret the Bible in such a way as suits you. And I have to be careful, obviously, of that I just don't want it to be, meaning that, you don't have to go to church and listen to the priest, and therefore this is the verse that proves it, right? It doesn't exactly necessarily say that, but it does sort of say, like, it's not to me that proves it's not a mortal sin, like Catholics are supposed to believe that if you miss Mass one time every Sunday, any Sunday, if you miss Mass, it's a mortal sin. That's what they used to tell us. And now they kind of relaxed on that a bit now, no, it's just not really a moral. Well, it kind of is, but we don't really afford, this kind of nonsense, right? That's how you know that they are liars, when they constantly contradict themselves. If something's true, it's true always. It's not just, oh, well, people are different now, society's different, whatever, So this proves it. You never needed to go inside the building. You never needed to listen to the priest. But it might be no harm if it's a good priest. And being in a group of people could be a good or a bad thing, depending on the quality of the character of those group of people. You can't just go, don't want to go to church, let's just, you and me, gather together, and we'll say, in your name, technically speaking, we'll call this table Jesus, and then we'll flip on the Sunday game and watch sports ball. And it's all right with Jesus because he's there with us watching sports ball, and he's rooting for the Denver Broncos. You want, like, everyone should know without being told, without having to go to a priest, or without me telling you, that obviously you're just being a hypocrite there. Obviously you're just being self-serving. I might as well finish this here anyway. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Like, in other words, like, we do this ad infinitum. Although, again, 7 is a number that's repeated deliberately. He could have said 8, could have said 10, like 5. He could have said till 4, 5, 6 times, right? But he didn't. He said 7. When they pick numbers, they're not just at random. They're not arbitrary. 7 is the number of Jesus, according to This Russian guy, I forget his name, his first name, but his Panin, Panin. I did a video on that a little while back, and you'll find a bit more on that. You'll find his book on my Odyssey channel, Eternal Extrapolations on Odyssey. Anyway, 7 is the number of Jesus, but I've heard of the people saying it's different. But this lines up anyway with what I've read from Panin, Panin. Therefore, is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. But forasmuch as he had not to pay, his lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. The servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Then the lord of that servant was moved with compassion, and loosed him, and forgave him the debt. But the same servant went out and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him 100 pence, and he laid hands on him, and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me that thou owest. And his fellow servant fell down at his feet, and besought him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. And he would not, but went and cast him into prison, till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what was done, they were very sorry, and came and told unto their lord all that was done. And then his lord, after that he had called him, said unto him, O thou wicked servant, I forgave thee all that debt, because thou desirest me. Shouldest not thou also have had compassion on thy fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee? And his lord was wroth, and he delivered him to the tormentors, till he should pay all that was due unto him. So likewise shall my heavenly Father do also unto you, if ye from your hearts forgive not every one his brother their trespasses. So look, there's a danger here in thinking, yeah, karma, haha. And I see that all the time. You know, I would lend people money or whatever, and not only would they not then be kind to other people, but they would never lend me money, you know? Or anyway, but the point is, right? I didn't mean to sort of say, hey, I'm such a good guy. Forget that. You think, karma's going to happen, and people are like, yeah, well, can't wait till we get to heaven, and then God's going to kill him, and he'll reward me. You can't be thinking that way. It's really self-serving. It's not just self-serving. That eats away at you. That turns you into like a golem, kind of going, I can't wait till he gets his just desserts. But look, what this is obviously an analogy for, a parable that is speaking to is, you really got to check out what's in your moral framework and how you really are treating other people here. Because we all are focused on the things that other people did. And you shouldn't be sort of saying, I better be good now, so I'm rewarded in heaven. I would see it more as embarrassment, that you get up there and the big guy puts his arm around you and he says, let's just take a few action replays. And you have to ask yourself, would you be embarrassed to watch yourself on playback? When God would say, now look, isn't it obvious now with the benefit of hindsight? You could have done this, but you did this. Now maybe the punishment is only that you get put back into the game or not, and your memories are wiped again. Because you just have to keep playing the game. Maybe. Until you do the right thing, only because it's the right thing to do. Not because you're looking for benefit or reward, or because when you get up there with God and God says, can you honestly now justify what you did there? Do you honestly feel happy about how you acted there? And if you can't legitimately say no, it's not that you're refusing to have, maybe. It's just you'd be hanging your head in shame. You'd feel shame. And you would say, no, sorry, it's not a place where I would feel comfortable. I couldn't walk in that gate. I wouldn't feel right about it. You know? I know I wouldn't fit in there. I wouldn't I know that I wouldn't deserve. That would fit nicely with you're judged by your own standards, but your own clear standards, which you are distracted from when you're here, with all the noise and all the anguish and all the pain and all the other frivolous stuff that we're distracted with as well. And I do know, like, that with all the other stuff, and I'll try run this through them after I tell my little story now about the Switzers, right? I'm sorry for that. You can hear me sniffing my nose here, but anyway. So, and I'm not sure how it's going to come out, but I'm going to tell it because it's been on my mind a lot, and it seemed appropriate a little while back. So I'll just get into it. I asked Santa Claus for a racing car, a Formula One racing car as well. I wanted to be very specific, so just not an ordinary racing car. Because my parents told me, oh no, they're not buying it. Santa Claus is magic; like he can make anything he wants. And they sort of said, like, and it's and I sort of said, well, like, so if he's not buying it, does it cost him the same, like, as if you asked for, say, a Jack in the Box, or like, and I'm not sure if there was, no, computers wouldn't have been a thing then, really, but even handheld stuff, like as an LCD watch, game, but that would have been probably not even until the early to mid 80s. But anyway, I said, look, can I have a Formula One racing car? And I said as well, like, because they convinced me that I asked them all the questions, and they said, no, you can ask for anything. I said, like, so money is no object. And of course they would have thought, like, what's a kid going to ask for? Like, um, I'm not sure if I had a rocking horse already, or maybe I didn't, but something that I was, they're probably thinking, like, oh, well, of course, a rocking horse is such a Victorian toy. You'd swear I was born in the 1870s rather than 1970s. Anyway, because I'd asked all the right questions, done my due diligence, as they say, I felt I wasn't being a spoilt brat if I would say, well, can I have a Formula Racing car? Dear Santa, can I have a Formula Racing car? And I don't mean a toy one. And even if it's not a toy, I don't mean one with pedals. And, like, it has to have an engine in it. And it has to be full size, not a child size. I want a proper size. So I'm trying to be as clear as I can. It actually has to be one of those Formula One racing cars that goes 200 miles an hour. Thank you. I love you. P.S. Bye. And so obviously my parents would have found this note. I can't remember if I stuff it up the chimney or what you do with it, but anyway. And they would have said, look, we're just getting a pedal car, even though it's specifically written not to give me a pedal car. But anyway, the morning arrived, and let's say I was 3 anyway, and my parents are always there with the camera, and they're trying to catch my excitement of my face as I come in, and under the tree is all these wrapped presents, and here was this car, and I think maybe it wasn't wrapped, maybe it was wrapped. It's hard I can't remember, but all I remember is my disappointment, my face dropping when I saw that it was a pedal car. And I turned to my mom and I was like, maybe my face looked like it was about to cry, and I was like, but I was angry. I must have been angry, even though I don't actually remember the emotion. The emotion recall isn't there, but I remember it could have been confusion, consternation, because like, but I specifically said that it shouldn't be a pedal car. So how did Santa misread it or get it wrong? I was very clear about this, Anyway, I could see that my mother was looking a bit taken aback and aggrieved and maybe upset. And I think that was the day that I realized, even though I was only 3, I think Santa Claus isn't real. I think that's when the thought germinated in my mind. But at the same time, in my mind, I also said, but I want Santa Claus to be real, so I'm going to push that thought to the side and I'm going to play along. And I don't want my mother to be upset. So I'm going to say, oh no, it doesn't matter, it's still fine. No, it's good. It's good. It doesn't matter that it doesn't have an end. No, I like pedal. The pedal car is fine. I do love it, actually. So anyway, fast forward. I don't know how many weeks or months, but I mean, I wasn't allowed. I think out onto the road. Maybe you can understand if I'm 3. I wasn't allowed out onto the road to play. It was a housing estate. There wasn't heavy traffic, or 1 or 2 cars. They all knew, to take care of her children. But at the same time, my mother probably just didn't want to take any risk, and I wasn't allowed outside the gate, outside the garden gate. It wasn't a big garden, wasn't a big driveway. You just park a couple of cars on it, that was it. and the driveway was sloped, so I could get in the car and just roll down the hill. But it was a bit boring; couldn't go very far. And the next door neighbor was a kid, and she was. I said the next door neighbor. It wasn't her house. She obviously had parents. Now I don't know how old she was. She could have been 4. Maybe that would have seemed like ancient compared to me if I was 3. Maybe she was 5 or 6. I don't know. But she, for Christmas, had gotten a toy. I don't think it was a tricycle. I think it was a tractor. I think it was like a tricycle, but you pedal to the front wheel, and you know what I mean. It's a child's tractor thing. And I keep forgetting I have the screen here. Yeah, I can't talk and think. Not exactly like that, actually. Not like that John Deere one. They're a lot better now than they were. It would have been not as ancient as these, but I think like that. I think something like that. Maybe like that. More like that, I'd say, Pedal farm tractor. And so when I saw that, I thought, oh, that looks really cool. Plus, you get bored with your own toys. So I said to her, can I have a go at your tractor? I think she was going by the gate, And she said, no. Just straight away, no. And I went, oh, that's mean. And then she kind of maybe went by again, and it could have been that she might have even taunted me a bit. And I said, well, like, I have this racing car, and I know she was looking at it, and I said, like, I mean, you can have a go at my racing car if you like. And she went, no, it's okay. And I went, oh, damn, because I felt like, well, that's it. If you can't ask somebody to be nice, and if you can't then bargain with them, then what can you do? And I think I don't know if that was the first time I met her, or if I had seen her once or twice before. But anyway, I don't know if it was another day or later on that day. She went by again, and I think I said to her, maybe I had thought of a plan in the meantime, and I said, if I push you, how about I push you on the tractor? And would you like that? And she went, oh yeah, would you? Yeah, oh great. I didn't need to convince her of that, so I pushed her on the tractor. I think maybe I did sneak out the garden gate, and I pushed her up and down the footpath. And I don't know what exactly the story was. Maybe I've asked for permission, and I just had to stay on the footpath. Maybe, whatever, I don't know. And so I pushed her up and down on that, and I figured, like, I was out of breath at the stage, pushing her up the road, down the road, and she, I guess, take her feet off the pedals. And so then I said to her, now will you push me? And she said, no. And I went, oh, but like, I pushed you up and down the road. And she went, yeah, so whatever, it's mine. This kind of thing. And I thought this was remarkably unfair. And so anyway, next time, anyway, maybe she relented that time, or maybe next time, but at some point anyway, she relented, and she was, okay, then you can have a go. And I went, oh, really? Great. Thanks a minute. And she went, but I'm not pushing you. You have to pedal yourself. And I went, oh, okay. Well, fair enough. So I pedaled myself anyway. And then I was pedaling for a little bit and said, oh, this is pretty cool. And then she, maybe she pushed me gently for a bit anyway. And I went, oh, great, thanks a minute. And then she pushed me really violently. And as I say, like, she was, I don't know what age she was, but she was older than me and bigger than me, So, I maybe thought she was like a big sister. But big sisters can be mean, can't they? Well, I don't know. But anyway, she pushed me so violently that, it did a wheelie, and I landed on my back. And I probably cried. And I thought that this was the most sort of outrageous grievance that had been done, in the history of quite a long time. Because I'd been nice to her, and I'd offered to share my toy. Maybe I'm pretty sure, by the way, I had already shared my Formula One toy. Maybe at one stage she did say she would like a go of it. So I'd shared my toys as I was told to do. I had I'd sort of said, well, here's the bargain. If maybe I didn't make a bargain, maybe just said, I'll push you, but I expected her to sort of say, oh yeah, well, it's sort of quid pro quo, I didn't know the Latin then, but I kind of figured, listen, if I'm pushing you, then you push me, it's only fair. She didn't see it that way for whatever reason, but I thought that, then pushed me off the toy deliberately, like, in a sort of intentionally harmful way, wanted to, and I thought, what did I ever do to her? Like, I wasn't mean to her at all, and yet she was really mean to me, spiteful, vindictive for no reason. And so I sort of must have run in crying and being a tattletale, and I said to my father, um, that girl pushed me off the tractor. And he went, well, what are you doing in the tractor anyway? Why aren't you playing with your Formula One car, And I said, because the Formula One car's pedals are blah, 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 or whatever, Um, and are stuck, or they get stiff, that kind of thing. And so anyway, he said, he didn't just sort of sympathize and sort of say, well, it was, first of all, it was, well, you shouldn't have been on it. And then secondly, it didn't happen. He said, no. I said, well, she pushed me off, and she definitely pushed me off. No, that didn't happen. It must have been a mistake. I said, no, it definitely wasn't a mistake. And he said, no, look, he says, look, what you got to understand is, he says, little girls are made of sugar and spice and all things nice. Little boys are made of slugs and snails and puppy dogs' tails. I didn't mind the puppy dogs' tails bit too much, but the slugs and snails, I knew that he was saying I was made of gross slime, whereas girls are made of lovely sugary sweets and, all the kind of candies and cinnamon spices and all this kind of that you love, that is just so lovely. It looks good. It tastes lovely. It's got all these, I'm thinking of, like, say, cinnamon. Maybe I'm thinking of cinnamon lollipop or something like that. Hopefully nothing bad will come up now. Yeah, maybe that's not too bad there. Yeah, something else. I just worried. Yeah, so I'm thinking of all this sort of lovely stuff, And he's telling me, so, like, and I'm a young, impressionable child, and he's just rhyming off something that he was told when he was a child. But, like, to him, that's wisdom, like. But it isn't. It's nonsense to tell boys that. Because one of the things is that girls can be spiteful and mean for no reason at all. And now that shouldn't be the only moral lesson of it, right? The big takeaway here is that I thought, okay, well, my father's telling me that can't happen. So it did happen, but that must be so rare that I must have been so unlucky just to be living next door to a girl who is mean like that. And never apologized and never would, and maybe her parents never knew about it. So they would never tell her to apologize. But I was just told, well, just toughen up. Now, maybe I could have toughened up if I had been told, if he had agreed, right, it did happen, and that was really mean of her. And if he had said, look, sometimes people just are mean to each other for no reason, including girls, so that you're not under any illusion that it's only men who are mean to each other, right? That's the lesson from it, right? And then the big picture takeaway is that don't think then, just because children are nasty to each other, that when they're disciplined properly by their parents, that they grow up then with the proper instruction to know to be good to each other. That, he might have said, well, look, she didn't know any better. Right? Maybe, her parents don't discipline her as much, or they do, but, like, they can't be watching everything she does, or I must have said something or done something that upset her. Pretty sure my father did think that. Which, again, is hypocritical, because, like, if he would be, say, fighting with my mother, not that they fought that much, but, when they did, or if he would have felt aggrieved that my mother would have been nasty to him, it never would have occurred to him to sort of say, well, I must warn my son now. That they're not all sweetness and light. And so that's a lesson that women, there's a cognitive dissonance with women. Women understand this, that other women can be vindictive and spiteful for no reason, which is what amplifies the problem there, right? Not the problem, but amplifies the injustice of it. It amplifies the grievousness of it. That's the word I think I was looking for, close enough to it anyway. And what amplifies the problem then is that while women know it, they deny it, even to themselves, as and when it's suitable for them to do so. Like appropriate or necessary to their needs, emotional needs, to believe in something else. And men, for so long, and I'm not in the business of current affairs, nor I'm in the business of men's rights, nor women's rights, nor egalitarian stuff. I don't mean to be equivocating on anything, but there is a balance in all things, and understanding things is necessary. That's why it's important to go over old stuff as new stuff. While we can't do anything to depose the tyrants, we have to make sure that if we were ever in charge of this world, that we would have to be morally superior and know it, not have to appeal to any other institution. All we'd have to do is look inside ourselves with an objective eye and know that we are speaking from a point of view that we are morally superior, speaking from a solid foundation. Never have to appeal to an outside source. God says this, so you have to do that. None of that. You would just know it, and they would know it because you would be speaking the truth, and they would know it when they heard it. And that's what makes, if you want to call them demons, cower in fear, because they know it. They know what you're saying is true, and you have the courage of saying it, even though you'll get no thanks for it. And I'm pretty sure that'll sound true to you as well. So, that I'm going to close that there now. Going to close off some tabs. Don't need that anymore. Don't need that. Don't think I need that. Don't think I need that anymore. That. Yeah, I'll leave those for the moment. Okay, so there's Henry David Thoreau again. Worth repeating. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And why am I doing this? It's so that you know, either you who I'm directing this to now, because I think you need it, because I need you to know that you're not the only one struggling, both with the will to stay alive and the will not to hurt other people around you. And for anybody else who any of this might be useful to hear now and in the future, if this should survive in some form. That what is true now is true always before now and in 2030, 2040, 2050, 2100, 2200 and so on. Now, I'm not bigging up myself. I'm not trying to embellish myself. I'm not trying to say I'm the single source of truth. I'm just a vessel for the truth. But you hear always in the corporate environment, we need a single source of truth. Who will we appoint as the single source of truth? So that we'll say, that's the official truth. But you can't, but you'll notice you can never go to a person. It's just a department. The department has said, and they don't sign it, just signed the department. They always hide behind their monstrous creations. Just like, the AI said it in other words, but it's really humans speaking through it. Saying the AI said it, so it must be true. No. You can check whether something's true by turning it around inside you, examining it from all angles. And when you do that with your own moral framework, you don't need to consult Google or whatever is the latest search engine or authority on facts. Single source of truth. And you'll know them by their words as well, because the words they use, single source of truth, right? In contrast to the Bible's King James Version there, in my opinion, it sounds much more beautiful than regular English speech. When they use their words, they're always cold, clinical, harsh, single source of truth. They even manage to make truth sound ugly and cold, like a surgeon's operating table. If there's time, I'll get on to George Gurdjieff here. What I said there leads me into Roger Waters here. Apparently, he addressed the UN recently. I'll play a little bit of this just so you get context, because I still thought, like, for a long time watching this, is he just speaking into a laptop? Is this pre-recorded? Is he addressing them live? It's very hard to tell. And of course, so many people allegedly gathered there in the UN don't seem to be paying attention. But we'll watch this anyway, and I'll skip forward a little bit.
So, back to Ukraine. The invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation was illegal. I condemn it in the strongest possible terms. Also, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was not unprovoked.
Okay, so he's saying that there's harm on both sides there, fault on both sides, and goes to call for a ceasefire. I should have queued it up at some other point here, but this is a roundabout it. I'll search for it now.
Find out everything you can about.
I'll go back a little bit. Right, he's talking about his mother. Um, his father died. I think he said when he was either 5 months or 5 years old. Either way, when he was very young.
Teacher. I say was, she's been dead.
I think I need to go back a little bit because he justifies why he's talking to the UN.
Lay in the hands of its permanent members, and that I was concerned that that was undemocratic and rendered this council somewhat toothless. This morning, however, I had a revelation upon waking. Toothless. Maybe toothless in some ways is a good thing. If this is a toothless chamber, I can open my big mouth on behalf of the voiceless without fear of getting my head bitten off. How cool is that? Anyway, I read in the paper this morning some anonymous diplomat quoted as saying, Roger Waters, to address the Security Council, whatever next? Mr. Bean? Ha ha ha! You know what they're like. Anyway, sorry. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Bean is an ineffectual character in an English comedy show on television. So it's a penny to a pound. The anonymous diplomat is an Englishman. Ha ha! Thank you, sir. Anyway, I think it's time to introduce my mother, Mary Duncan Waters. She was a big influence on me. She was a school teacher. I say was, she's been dead for 15 years. My father, Eric Fletcher Waters, was a big influence on me too. He too is dead. He was killed on the 18th of February, 1944, near Apulia, near the Anzio bridgehead in Italy. I was only 5 months old. So I know something about war and loss. Anyway, back to my mum. When I was about 13, I was struggling with some knotty adolescent problem or other, trying to decide what to do. It doesn't matter what it was. I can't remember anyway, but my mum sat me down and said, now listen, you're going to be faced with many knotty problems during your life, Roger. And when you are, here's my advice. Read, read, read. Find out everything you can about whatever it is. Look at it from all sides, all angles. Listen to all opinions, especially ones you don't agree with. Research it thoroughly. And when you've done that, you will have done all the heavy lifting. And the next bit is easy. Is it? Okay, Mum. Well, what's the easy bit? Oh, the easy bit is you just do the right thing. Whew. So speaking of doing the right thing brings me to human rights. We the people.
Now, I'm going to leave it there because unfortunately, somebody can say something amazing like that and then go on to say, which sort of defeats or undermines my argument a bit, go on to say things that I don't necessarily agree, or else it makes me worried because I know when people talk about healing the whole world, that I think this guy does have the best of motivations, but I think that it can wreak unintended consequences. So he more or less would like an end to all wars and then with the money saved, feed everybody in the world. Unfortunately, there are some people in the world who, if you feed them, they'll just reproduce more. And then there's more mouths to feed. And I know that people don't like this guy. I can't think of his first name. But anyway, Malthus, who gives his name to the adjective Malthusian, which means a desire to reduce the world's population. But if the world's territory is finite, you can't just keep expanding your population ad infinitum and then say, oh, well, we just need to find more money to feed more people. Or try and sort of allow ourselves to believe in a fanciful notion that we'll just use technology to find more and more ways to feed more and more people. I mean, eventually there has to be a point where, like, are you just standing shoulder to shoulder, literally? Human beings like to have a bit of room. And unfortunately, there are people who act responsibly and other people who don't. So there calls for a measure of pragmatism in the real world. So it might be nice to be a lovely English gentleman like Roger Waters here. Used to be a rocker, but then again, his music was always, I suppose, contemplative and political. Another brick in the wall and money. And the sound of the cash registers. Adding the greasy halfpenny to the penny, or the greasy penny to the halfpenny, and the greasy till. That's from one of George W. Not George W. Good God, William Butler Yeats's poems. But anyway, Roger Waters here. He looks like the kind of old English gentleman that I wish England was still populated with in the majority. But he's a dying breed, and it might be nice for him to think that, well, his legacy could be that he addressed the UN saying to them, please do like John Lennon told you, and imagine there's no countries, no wars, and we all just, fed each other, looked after each other. That's nice, yes, but it's a bit too woolly and abstract and nebulous an idea. It won't happen. I think that we do need borders. Now, I think he does talk about Elon Musk does talk about how we can't put all our eggs in one basket, nationalistically speaking. If the world were to become one single country, then if that's all there is, then if the world fails, then we're all gone. So in the same way as, say, like, the New World, when America was there, if there was people who wanted to flee all the centuries of wars in Europe that had raged throughout Europe for centuries, then they could get over there, leave the war behind, and start anew, close their borders, not allow, once they won the Revolutionary War, and not allow the people who create wars to come over there. But alas, they didn't guard their borders. But I mean, just like, other places, like, say, South Africa, for example, if you're going to have your own country, you need to not be reliant on any other country. You have to have all the resources you need. And if you don't have them, then make do what you had. And there's a huge culture still there of never letting scrap food go to waste. Because, people grew up with saying, well, there's sanctions against us. The world won't trade with us unless, well, I won't get into it now, unless they trade through certain intermediary countries in the Middle East, on the Mediterranean. But anyway, point being, Elon Musk addressed the UN as well, saying that we do need to keep countries. I think he might have made the example as well, or maybe somebody else did, that Christianity or Christendom might see Islam or the Muslim world as their nemesis. But at the same time, if Christendom fails, then you would hope that another sort of branch or cousin of what is this Earth civilization would continue. And, maybe every culture thinks its own culture is the best. I see great flaws in the Western culture, but I think that it was maybe from the 50s until the 80s. It was one of the freest societies to live in. But it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. I do think that it's imperative that we do anything that we can to stop it. But Elon Musk is sort of saying, well, if at least if the West fails, other civilizations will continue on, And it's hard to say that, but I mean, if you do want to sort of say, well, at least something will be saved of humanity, because I mean, the alternative could be that AI takes over the entirety of the world, and everybody has got essentially an AI inside their brain, fact-checking everything. I'll close. I'll close that, and I was just trying to look for the tab there. I think I'm done with that there. I'll put all these links. I won't close them anymore, because I'll put a lot of these links in the description, because I don't want to go on too long. Maybe I'll do another one where I want to say all of these I want to make reference to a lot of different things, but this has been going for quite a while now. Um, okay, I'll just try and round up these things here, right? Well, I've got it here, right? If you made it this long, I recommend this guy to you, Roy Potter. He's Roy Potter QA on YouTube, and he's got a Twitter presence, and he's got an Odyssey presence. Basically, his Odyssey is just a backup of this. Hopefully, if this is ever deleted, Odyssey will not be deleted. Roy, I think, is a genuine, decent man. The genuine article. Uh, I won't tell you too much of his background because if I say what religion he was a member of, that just puts people off immediately. You have to hear who he is now, his thoughts in the past, and in his story. I've got bits of it over the last. I think maybe I discovered him in 2020. He's a very religious man and very knowledgeable about the history of religion. Very knowledgeable. He's written books about it, and he's a retired either colonel or lieutenant colonel. And so whatever he says on the current state of affairs between Ukraine and Russia and the intelligence agencies in the United States is worth listening to because it's from experience.
To talk about,
I'll just play a little bit, just give maybe a flavor. I'll put this particular one in the link and you can listen to it. I think there's definitely some things in it that's worth listening to.
The whole OWS system and all that was trying to do. They don't want you to know about the war on your food supply, which this train wreck in Ohio was partly. They let that go because it's destroyed crops and livestock within 100 miles of there. It's all war on your food supply, just like I pointed out at Bundy Ranch back in 2014 when I saw the BLM and the federal government do it there. Anybody that stood up against it, they wanted to call them criminals because they're the criminals. They're the mafia, so to speak, the organized crime that's gotten control of our institutions. And now they're trying to also, and this is very upsetting, they're trying to ruin the children. And that's when God says that's enough.
Well, maybe he's saying like that there will be a second coming. I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. Or when I put my fingers in the side of Jesus, just like doubting Thomas. But we'll see. We'll see how composed I am if and when that happens. I like this guy. I think what you see is what you get. I don't think there's any subterfuge. I don't think, but you make up your own mind. I don't think there's any artifice there. He's done this for too long now, just live, straight to camera. He's an older guy, and I don't think he's got anything to necessarily lose either. But I think he's a man of conviction and he's a man of principle. Roy Potter QA. This is a woman, she, I can't think of her name now, Rosie Kay, says there in the title. Just by way of example, I'll put it in the links there. Interesting to listen to. She started off great, talking about how she was trying to cast something for a play, actors for a play, and she was told, oh, well, this lead character has to be a trans woman of color or whatever it was. And she sort of said, I had a feeling this was going to be the case. And she said, so I knew I had to sort of stand up and defend women. So she is what in this day and age people are calling a trans exclusionary radical feminist, a TERF, as a pejorative term. But I can see both sides. I'm on neither because this woman is not my ally. It's only an uneasy bedfellow because she's only acting out of self-interest. That's it. But she also wants the acclaim of basically being like a Joan of Arc, vanguard. I'm standing up for principles and rights. No, it's only because it's affecting her in the pocket that there's roles that she won't be able to get because she'll be subordinate in the totem pole or hierarchy of victimhood. So if all this was fixed, she'd go back to being her sort of what's the word for it now? Not exactly intransigent, but like uncooperative, and sort of spiteful, vindictive woman, who dislikes men, thinks men have it easy. She said that she did a play about war. She was embedded with some British troop or whatever you call it, a regiment, and she was expecting to be 10% of women because she'd heard 10% of the army were women, but there was no women there, and she was surprised and disappointed, but she got on with it anyway, and the men were very nice to her. And then when she put on the play, a US soldier said he had to go and see it several times and brought his family because he thought it was so good and it really spoke to him and told him something about war. And she said, oh, that meant a lot to her because she really is concerned about all the women. And maybe she said women and children, but women in Afghanistan. So she's worried about the women in Afghanistan, but she's not worried about the men or boys in Afghanistan. Mark Dice, again, I think he's more or less as much as you're going to get in the internet, especially for mainstream internet with 1.8, what does he have? 1.85 million subscribers, but that hasn't really moved in a couple of years, I would say. So the Bacha Bazi, just a cultural thing where they dress little boys up in sort of makeup and a dress and get them dance around for the Afghani soldiers, or just Afghani men in general, and a bit more than that, like maybe the colonels or the sergeants might sort of say, "Well, I know where the dancer will be staying tonight," that kind of thing, in my tent. And in case anybody doesn't know, it's a matter of historical fact that the US military discovered this while they were in joint operations with whoever was supposed to be the good guys on the side of the civil war that they'd fomented in Afghanistan. And they said, yeah, we don't want that to be highlighted. Just ignore it. Because I think maybe some guys were taking justice into their own hands. And they were saying, all of that is to be ignored, left alone. Do not intervene. If you see any indecent acts happening, do not intervene. Now, and of course, these days, you know why, because it's just as bad in the US pretty much anyway. But these days, a woman like that would say, do you see, I'm right. It's always men who do the aggressive stuff to women and children. Apparently that's not the case. Apparently women not only do the same kind of torture to children, but they do it maybe more than not. Now, who knows for sure, because it's what gets reported, what gets discovered. But because women generally are more pleasant to look at, we tend to assume that the content of their character is nicer, is sweetness and light. And that's the point of the story. It's more difficult to remember, but we must remember that they're not. And I might as well call in just here George Gurdjieff. Read about him and his alarm clocks. I'll put that link in there. We have to constantly remind our conscious mind. We have to find ways. It's like that movie. Good God, I can't think of the name of it. Memento. Isn't that ironic? Memento, I think it was, with Guy Pearce. And he has to tattoo things to remind himself about things that he has to remind himself about. Right. So I'm just going to go through these. That's your one. That's Mark Dice. That's today. I'll put that link in there as well. Excuse me. I'm sorry for coughing into the microphone. Mark Dice had a very good guest on today. I really liked what he said. I'd never heard of him before. I don't know his name. Does he have it there on screen? I don't think he does. Does he have his name in here? I'll put the link in there anyway. I'm sorry that I don't know the guy's name, but I'm going to play a little bit of it here from this point. I think that he says some useful things apropos to what I've been talking about in general and over the last little while.
I would say New York and California, whether you were in a small town or a big city, you probably felt the brunt of it a lot more than the middle America, southern states, a lot of the country. So I'd say it was difficult to separate those things. But like you said, you talked to a lot of different people. What other subjects did you gravitate towards during the past few years?
I mean, when you talk about the last few years in particular, there's no way to untangle what we went through. I saw a lot of social changes around here. We're still the home of the brave single person driving in a car with the windows up and a mask on. That's still the home of people like that mainly. We've seen a lot of that going on. So I understand the impacts, just like we had a lot of impacts felt after the other faster moving 9/11. COVID was slow motion 9/11. And what happened is that inside of that, as we opened up that package, we realized it was tied in with a lot of the things that you were just covering. The World Government Summit, the acceleration going on there, and all of the initiatives that have been pushed since the early 90s with Agenda 21 surfacing in public view and this slow boil toward 2030 and the Great Reset. It's been nonstop. Inside of there is the transhumanism stuff. Inside of there is all the ways that we have been curtailed in the way that we talk to each other, not just online, but the things that we're able to touch when we're face to face. There is such a huge push to modify human behavior, right down to the things that we eat, that it's really hard to figure out things outside of what COVID was really connected into, because it's really all it's all part of the same plotting, if you ask me. And I think that you would largely agree with that. So that's what I'm thinking about. Now, the other thing is trying to discern between what is a distraction and what is merely a precursor for something else that is coming, because so many things are happening at once. It's hard to make heads or tails of whether or not you're wasting time on something, or whether this is going to be a harbinger for something else that's coming.
I better just stop it there again, and a couple of hot words were said. I might, while I'm compressing this to upload, I might see if I can do something about that. But anyway, we'll see. I think this is one worth listening to, and especially with the holding in mind the idea of what is important to listen to and to watch online. The funny thing is, every day, even though, like, for the last couple of years, or maybe even before March 2020, I did figure I knew everything. I just needed to tell everybody everything about what's been going on and the way our governments work and the way our governments have always worked and everything like that, and not being able to understand why adults didn't already realize. But the thing is that, like, so my parents would have been aware of all of the things to do with communism and World War II, and the horrors that had been done behind the Iron Curtain in the gulags, and not just the stories of what happened in the place where they are said to have put people to work, where work might have set them free, mostly in places in Poland that were under German occupation, right? Not just there. My parents would have been very much aware and constantly told me about the ills of communism, that to make everybody equal, they just chop everybody off at the knees. They absolutely would have been aware of the gulags, and it was sort of like a phrase or a byword, like, well, we'll send you off to Siberia. That it was a phrase, like being sent to Coventry. It was just, and they weren't ignorant of where those phrases came from. So for that, I'll have to mention, and I'll see if it's here in the right order. Yeah, this guy. I'm amazed that I got that in the right order. Apparently his name is Giles Udi or Udai. If that's his name, I'm amazed because it sounds Russian. But anyway, I'll put the link for it. And I've only discovered these people's channel very recently. Trigger Nometry. I think it's a bit of a play on words, but it's trigger and then Nometry. Nometry. Trigger, like trigonometry. But trigger Nometry. I'll put the link there, and they've lots of very, very, very good discussions, interviews. They're like podcasts, but recorded in a nice, bright studio, like a lot of them are these days. But anyway, this guy seems like, again, a perfect Englishman, but maybe from Udi or Udai. Maybe he's originally from Russia, which actually a lot of English people, British people are, like, or were from, even in the 20th century, 19th century. Of course, there was a connection between King George. Oh God, was it King George? But anyway, the King of England and the King of Prussia, or King of Germany, and the Tsar Nicholas II, who was murdered by the Bolsheviks and his whole family in a most brutal fashion, and inhumane and disgusting, and animalistic way. I'll leave it at that. But everything that you think that sort of bloodthirsty, low-class scumbag soldiers who have been told that it is their right to kill these immoral people and their family, dispatch them in any way you see fit. They're the ones who are responsible for every reason why your life didn't go well. Well, you know what they're going to do then to the king's daughters. They're going to feel that it's God on their side, or if their God is their state, or the great plan, the nebulous plan that they're not really sure of, but they know somebody up there is in charge of. They just have to follow orders and all will be okay. So this fella, I mean, like he mentions, of course, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he went to visit. And I didn't know that the Gulag Archipelago, I'm so ignorant, I didn't know the Gulag Archipelago was a literal archipelago of islands in the White Sea. So I've been living in Europe all this time, but not Eastern Europe, so I didn't really care that much. I just wanted to have fun or whatever, you know. While all this black and white stuff just remained in history, I just thought, oh, what does it matter now? All those people are dead. Do you see how it does matter? We need to know what happened before we came along, so that we know that we are the people who are morally superior and righteous, and that we wouldn't harm anybody because of something inside us that was lacking, you know? We need to definitely, I'm sorry to say it, but we definitely need to examine ourselves like the android. I think it was the android or the simulant or whatever it was on one of the Alien films with Ripley in it. Always forget what the android's name is. I'll quickly have a look. Was it called Simon? That would fit if it was right. Okay, well, Bishop, there's the name of it, but that's a more modern one anyway, I think. Maybe not, maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it was he who examined his own programming, you know, by sort of ripping open his abdomen, looking at all the wires and rewiring himself. I think that's where it comes from. I might be mistaken, but if not, that's there as a metaphor, and I'm sure it's not the only movie that has it as a metaphor, nor the only story. So it's up to us human beings to do that in the best possible way, to rebuild ourselves in the image of God, if you want to put it in Christian way, but you have to be careful and not accidentally do it out of pride, and you end up making the devil out of yourself. You could easily do that, and the devil has a compelling argument that humanity needs to be controlled and condemned to that eternal prison of hell, where everybody wanted to go there, and their minds will be so subjugated they'll never even think of wanting to escape anyway, because it'll never even occur to them to be higher minded, to be so higher minded to want to get out of such a place. The very concept of being an other place won't be possible to conceive of. So this guy was very pleasant to listen to. I have to say that I only watched probably about halfway through. I'll play from this point here because what he does say is important. But I had to sort of take a break from it because it is very, very troubling for the mind. Take everything in small doses as well. You know, if something's really upsetting you to the point where you feel like that physically you're going to lose control, put it down for a while, assimilate it later, but know that it's important knowledge and be self-disciplined, mentally disciplined.
Yeah. Why is that? It's a big question, isn't it? You go back. As far as the British left were concerned between the wars, everything Soviet was good. You know, the spy Anthony Blunt, who was later on revealed, he was in Cambridge in the early 30s. He arrived in Cambridge, had to leave for a term, he was going off studying somewhere. He came back, he said, when I came back to university, everyone had become communist. It was the end thing. It was cool then. It was cool then. It was cool when I was at school, because most people haven't the faintest idea what it means. They just think it's something warm and fuzzy. We're all going to share and whatever else. So as far as the communism is concerned, leaving aside the Soviet symbols, as far as the communism is concerned, people do not know. The Communist Manifesto is absolutely clear. The abolition of the family. You know, you say, oh, communists want to abolish the family. Don't be so right-wing. It's in there. It's explicit. Abolition of the family, abolition of all property ownership, Little corner shop wouldn't exist in Soviet Russia. Taken out of your hands. If you were actually trying to set up a private business, throw you into prison.
Well, that was a crime under the Soviet statute, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So abolition of property, abolition of the family, abolition of religion, big one, and abolition of morality. Those are in the Communist Manifesto. And I feel you kind of got to go up to a Trotskyite today and say, do you want to do that? Do you believe, as Marx said and as Trotsky endorsed, the only way to transform society is by violent revolution? Because Marx was actually explicit. Violence is the midwife of the new society. There's only one way you can get there. It's bloodshed. You need to ask these people, do you really believe that? Because that's what these people you supposedly follow are actually preaching.
Well, I'll stop it there anyway. I hope you get the idea there. And that is the way, right? To be brave, right? We can't just depose these tyrants. So unfortunately, though, we do have to continue to try and not speak rationally necessarily to the people who are ardently on the left. They don't want to be proven wrong. But if they will allow it, and I think a lot of people know that they cannot be put in a position where they can allow themselves to be questioned. But if they will, say, pretend momentarily that they would like to engage you in a debate of some kind, right, even if it's not as formally expressed as that, and they want to pretend that they are talking to you in good faith, at the very least, it would be important to sort of say to them, can we sort of take your general ideas about where our society is going and our governments are taking us, and the government for which you say that you support or that you voted for or whatever, can we clarify a little bit more, take it from the sort of nebulous idea of, well, we're making progress and we just have to, can you tell me, like, what is it that you want exactly? Is this what you want? Is that, because I mean, I don't want that either. Do you want that? I think we don't want that. And as irritating, as annoying as it is, we can't get to these people at the top and say, hi, what do you think of your leaders now? And now now that there's a different social paradigm, you all slink off, don't you? And you're not so full sure of yourselves anymore now, are you? That you don't have the might of the state behind you to back up your insanity and compel us to not exactly accept your lies, but to be almost helpless to do anything to counteract them. That each one of us must be brave in our personal lives and say, put it to them. Is this what you want? I just want to be clear. Is this what you want? Just so I understand where we're going, what we're leaving for our children. And maybe, try not to polemicize them, try not to say, the hell that we're leaving for our children. Is this the den of iniquity? Is this the hell that you want to create for ourselves? Maybe try not to be too emotive like that. We know the way these people are. They run on nothing but emotion, but I mean, they've got so many trigger words. It's like Indiana Jones trying to cross that floor with all the different boulders where you have to know the right ones not to step on. And it requires us being very composed and having a tight rein on our own emotions. I'm not perfect at that, nowhere near perfect. But unfortunately, it's part of being a man, where you keep that storm within. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And manliness is not punching somebody in the face or worse. It's not stabbing somebody in the back. It's growing up and taking responsibility for the things you might have done wrong in the past. Building our own mental support system, our own mental crutches, deciding for ourselves what are our core principles. What do we really believe in? What are we willing to live and die for? Not focus on somebody doesn't love me, so I must make sure that she pays for it or whatever, Not saying, well, my brother won't speak to me, so I won't speak to him. Not saying my brother won't speak to me, so I must find some way to, I don't know, make other people not like him or whatever it might be, Or that, my friend has done me wrong or whatever, I mean, sometimes you just have to get on with things. I certainly wouldn't apologize to people just because you're lonely or you need a friend or whatever, Sometimes friendships do end. A lot of times they do end because you're only actually after discovering sometimes who the person was. A lot of times most of the time, I think, in fact, perhaps almost all the time, in fact, perhaps maybe all the time, what we end up doing is projecting our desires onto other people and imagining really what willing the other person, whether it's a girlfriend or a wife, or hopefully not a wife, but a girlfriend or a friend that we might have. We might hope they have these qualities that we wish we had, and we project those qualities onto others. Like say with women, a lot of men wish that they admire kindness, they admire gentleness, and so that they project that onto women. But women maybe have vindictiveness and spitefulness, really, and they might wish men go out and do that to other men. It's all very simple but very complex at the same time. Anyway, I wouldn't go apologizing to people just because you're lonely, but at the same time, I wouldn't go, and I'm not talking to you specifically, I'm talking to anybody. You have to do everything for the right reasons, as Roger Waters says there. You examine everything from as many sides as you can. And then after that, it's easy. You just do the right thing and you'll know what the right thing is if you're honest with yourself. Excuse me, right. I'll try and finish up here now. I'll see. Damn it, I closed something there. But anyway, I think I'd already done it. I think it was the woman there who's an actress. Actresses who did used to be thought of in the low as the lowest of the low for centuries, basically like beggars. This is what you're up against. No, I'll tell you what. There is a few more things to play, and they're important. And what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to take a break. And anyway, I think that the one I was looking at, I'm going to take a break, and I will come back when I found the thing that I'm looking for, I think.